Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this third Survivors webinar. We're very pleased to have you here. I know from the chat that we have already people from Iran, from Brazil, from Spain, so very happy to have you. I will now give the floor to Julia Chalino, who is going to give us some housekeeping rules. Thank you very much and welcome. Enjoy this webinar.
Good morning. Thanks, Joe, for the introduction. I'm Julia Challenor, the Secretary General of the International Society of Pediatric Oncology, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here today. On the screen, you can see the agenda, and I'm just going to go briefly. You have an opening, and then we will hear from our SIOP president, Survivor Roundtable. We have several survivors who will be speaking. Patient rights advocacy, a speaker for that. A parent roundtable follows. And finally, we have an inspirational speaker, and our CCI president, João Barcancha, who you just heard, will close out the morning. I am now going to, let's see, try to go to my other slide. Let's see if I can get this off. And I'm going to show you some housekeeping slides so you can listen. These are our Zoom instructions. We have simultaneous translation today in Spanish and in English. Most speakers will be speaking in English, but one speaker will speak in Spanish. So to follow the meeting in Spanish, please click on the globe icon below in your Zoom. It will look like this where the blue arrow is. Down here, it will say interpretation. If you click on that button, it will give you, select your language. You can pick either English or Spanish, whichever you prefer. We're going to ask you to participate by adding your questions or your comments in either the chat or the Q&A, and I will be monitoring it and pass that along to the moderator for as much time as we have following both the Survivor and the parent roundtables. This is where your chat is, down in below in your tray of your Zoom. Here you can click on here and type. You will see send to all panelists. Here's the Q&A. Here people may be able actually to write you an answer in case we don't have a chance to answer your question on screen. If you have a question we can't answer, and we will try to write to you that we don't know the answer, but we will try to get back to you later if you give us your email. If you're on your phone, you will see something similar. You'll see chat and Q&A in your tray. And that's the end of the housekeeping. And I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to Guillermo Chantada, who is the president of the International Society of Pediatric Oncology, to welcome you. Over to you, Guillermo.
Thank you very much, Julia. I would like to thank you and CCI for the invitation to open this session on behalf of SIOP. It's an honor for me to be here with you today. You are, in fact, you're the reason why we exist, the reason why we study, to research, we cover in the morning, travel to faraway places. Without the desire we have, the need we have to saving you, our work has no meaning. So what can be more satisfying for me, a pediatric oncologist, to be here with you today? But it's not only a matter of saving lives. That's a lot indeed, but it's certainly not enough. We continue to learn from you and just trying to make changes. The issue that will be discussed today, I think, is of great importance. In essence, we will discuss about how we will make our societies change. How will the society not consider having had cancer, childhood cancer, as a handicap? Do the policymakers, the banks, the health insurance have the right to know and that you had cancer, and then they adapt the decision on these factors, we have to prove them wrong. We need to show them they are doing a mistake. And for that, we need to have more conclusive data and also some change from our end, perhaps. With the new technologies that we are using now, we are digging very deep and finding information that we are not sure how to interpret. But we know, we really know it because you had cancer, and then we had the chance to study you. And we wanted to anticipate if you are going to have long-term health issues. In many instances, we don't know what this information means, and we have little information in non-cancer populations. Are we being too meticulous to the potential health risk that you face? How strong is the evidence we have now? How it differs from others that have not had cancer? We definitely need more data. A lot of this will be discussed today, and I am sure we will learn a lot from each other about the right to be forgotten by the many now adults or adolescents that have survived childhood cancer. While we strive for the right to be forgotten, we sadly still struggle for the right to be remembered of those who live in countries where they have more limited chances to survive. And also, we stand here with those that we can't forget, the children where they lost. So let me introduce now Carl Queiroz. Carl is the Executive Director of CCI, passionate about the cause of childhood cancer. Carl has over 23 years of experience in the nonprofit sectors, including his involvement in childhood cancer for over 7 years. He was the CEO of CHOC, the Childhood Cancer Foundation from South Africa, before becoming the Global Executive Director for CCI. So over to you, Carl.
Wherever you may be, it's so exciting to have you join us on this very important webinar on this important subject today. We're focusing on the right to be forgotten, and we're looking at post-treatment, the discrimination that survivors face post-treatment, and that's all I'm going to say introduction, because we've got some wonderful speakers lined up. We're going to share their knowledge and experience, but I'd like to first introduce the first moderator, someone I know well actually, Nkuli Bokotse. Nkuli is a childhood cancer survivor. She had ovarian germ cell tumor at the age of 15, and she has been working tirelessly for the cause of childhood cancer since then. She's also on the board of CHOC Childhood Cancer Foundation. That's how we know each other. And she's also the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital in Johannesburg. So warm welcome to you, Nkuli.
Thank you so much, Carl, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone who's joining us today. I have the pleasure of being joined on the panel by a wonderful group of survivors from different countries. I'm going to introduce them first before we do the first presentation. So I have with me this afternoon, I'm from South Africa. I have with me this afternoon, Tiago Costa. Tiago Costa is a childhood cancer survivor from Portugal and a patient advocate at Accreditor and CCI Europe. He's engaged in long-term follow-up of care of childhood cancer survivors, their socioeconomic rights, and topics related to adolescents and young adults with cancer. That's Tiago there for you. We also have Carla Soto Vargas. Carla is from Chile. She's 30 years old. She was diagnosed with a retinoblastoma back in 1996. She is currently working as an occupational therapist, and she's the co-founder of the survivor network Luz de Esperanza in Chile. Welcome, Carla. And then we have Cruz Perez Jimenez. Thank you, Carla. He is a 23-year-old acute myeloid leukemia survivor. He's from the border region of El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. He graduated from Texas A&M University with a Bachelor of Science in Biology, and he also completed a Master of Science in Applied Cognition and Neuroscience degree at the University of Dallas, Texas. He is now working towards his MD and PhD degree at UT Southwestern School of Medicine to become a physician and help kids with cancer in a more personal and a hands-on way. Welcome to Cruz. And then lastly, I have Barak Honest Peter. Barak is from Tanzania. He is 26 years old and has had quite a journey in his life. He says at the age of 16, he was diagnosed with leukemia, specifically acute lymphoblastic leukemia, stage 3. at Muhambili Hospital in 2012. It was a challenging time for him, but he fought very, very hard and completed treatment in December 2016. Then after conquering cancer, he's determined to continue his education, and he made the decision to go back to school. And he's happy to say that he's in his final year of university as a student at the Center for Foreign Relations in Tanzania. So welcome to all our survivors. Before we get into it, I'd like to just remind everybody who's here that we'll be taking questions at the end of our session. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring Tiago to take us through his experience of navigating a world post-cancer as a survivor. Thank you. Tiago, you can share your screen. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm very grateful to be here with all of you. Just going to share my screen. Okay, I think now you can see. So today I'm going to talk to you about the right to be forgotten. And yeah, this is a very important topic for the survivors, because we know that although the improvements of the survivorship rates and the resulting increase of the number of survivors, as most of us are aware of, young cancer patients and survivors face several challenges when undergoing and after the treatment. And for example, from data in Europe, at least 2/3 of survivors have early or late occurring complications due to their treatments, which are sometimes severe or even life-threatening for them. This has a strong impact not only on the survivors' daily lives, as well on their families. And improving their quality of life is a major and crucial goal, for example, having the best long-term follow-up care. Sometimes this feels like we are running an unending marathon, because as childhood or adolescent survivors, there are some obstacles and uncertainties that we face in the years after the treatment. So as the years go by, and one of these barriers could be this financial discrimination. So we know that cancer survivors still face discrimination because of their medical history. And despite of all these barriers to return to the normal life, we know that cancer survivors face additional barriers and challenges when trying to access financial services, such as an insurance or a loan. And two examples of this is when the survivor is being denied when accessing life or health insurance, or to have to pay a premium which is significantly higher than for a person that has other chronic conditions or that does not have a cancer disease in their past. So why is the right to be forgotten so important? Firstly, to provide legal rights for long-term cancer survivors, not to disclose to financial entities that they had been previously diagnosed with cancer. Secondly, all young cancer survivors should have the opportunity to access a fair insurance contract. And finally, so that the financial services institutions can inform these former patients and consumers of their rights. We can give you an example that some legislations are already implemented in some European countries, and that young adults whose cancer diagnosis occur before the age of 18 or 21, depending on the country, their medical history would be forgotten 5 years after the end of the treatment. So they are able after this time to go and to make, for example, a loan or to apply for an insurance, life or health insurance, for example. And then we have with these legislations that are already implemented in 6 European countries, we have also a challenge, because although this implementation is already done, and other countries are trying and are very close to do it, there are still some concerns regarding the law regulation, and the adopted legislative may vary depending on the implementing country. So the legislation is not equal in every country that has now this right to be forgotten law. And then we have also the difficulty in knowing how many survivors have already taken advantage of this law, because these child or adolescent patients are now young adults or adult survivors, and we may lose their track in the while. or it may be difficult for them to share their story, to do this storytelling, to do this patient advocacy, and to give their testimony with the help, for example, for patient organizations. But because we are stronger and we are working together, this is a topic that Young Cancer Survivors are working in Europe, in several entities and in projects, as you can see here in the European Network of Cancer Survivors. And with this, what we want in terms of the right to be forgotten is to increase our patient advocacy work, to increase the cooperation and dialogue between the patients and the policymakers, to set some recommendations to the national legislations, to raise awareness, for example, in this case, for the new legislation, tackling the discrimination for cancer survivors in accessing financial services. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tiago. I'd like to bring on Carla. Buenos dias, Carla, if she can just give us her experience from Chile. Thank you.
Hola, muchas gracias por la invitación. Voy a proyectar la pantalla. Bueno, por parte de mía como sobreviviente y en representación de los sobrevivientes desde Latinoamérica, yo quiero plantear el hecho de que hay muchos desafíos, muchas barreras que nos limitan bastante el poder llevar a cabo un olvido del cáncer, y nosotros a diario nos recordamos. Principalmente el mayor factor de dificultad que hay es a nivel social, en el estigma social, como la cultura en los países, la sociedad en general, tiene el estigma social respecto al cáncer infantil y cómo lo romantizan, cómo te dicen que eres un luchador, cómo te dicen que tú eres un guerrero, que estás luchando en una batalla a diario, que cuando sales del hospital tú eres más fuerte que cualquier otra persona porque lograste vencer el cáncer. Y ya eso es una carga emocional que nos lleva a quizás limitar nuestra forma de ser, nuestros sentimientos, nuestros pensamientos. Por otro lado, otra dificultad que tenemos ya al salir del hospital, de dejar de recibir este tratamiento continuo, es el acceso a las prestaciones de salud. O sea, conseguir un seguro de salud en el cual nos dé una buena calidad de vida para podernos atender es muy complejo. ¿Por qué? Por el mismo prejuicio de la preexistencia, del hecho de saber que tenemos cáncer, somos un problema, por decirlo así, para el sistema de salud, porque tenemos mayor riesgo de enfermedades, mayor cantidad de atenciones en el sistema de salud, y los seguros de salud no son capaces de cubrirlo, e incluso, como comentaba Tiago, te cobran un poco más. La otra dificultad que quisiera ahondar es el hecho de la educación. Acá en Latinoamérica, principalmente en Chile, se encuentran las escuelas hospitalarias, en las cuales los niños pueden seguir manteniendo su escolaridad, pero no es lo mismo al momento de reintegrarse a sus escuelas regulares. Cuando ellos están en una escuela hospitalaria, están en un contexto protegido, están con niños que están sufriendo lo mismo que ellos, tienen mayor empatía. En cambio, cuando llegan a una escuela tradicional, se vuelven el foco de atención, tienden a ser más protegidos o recibir más burlas, ser vulnerables frente a la sociedad, y esto obviamente conlleva una dificultad que va cargando todavía con el problema social, con este estigma social. Y una de las grandes dificultades a nivel de educación es la falta del apoyo pedagógico integral, que los docentes logren entregarle un apoyo, al alumno que sepa que viene saliendo de un tratamiento oncológico, ya que hay muchas secuelas que son silenciosas, como las secuelas cognitivas, y pudiese haber un apoyo desde el sistema educativo hasta llegar al sistema de educación superior. Y por último, otra dificultad que hay es a nivel laboral. Uno ya cuando crece, los años de estudio que tuvo para conseguir una carrera profesional, se enfrenta a otra barrera, que es a nivel laboral, que al momento de conseguir un trabajo, de asistir a una entrevista, lo primero que te preguntan, ¿qué te ocurrió cuando tú tienes una secuela física y evidente? O cuando hay una secuela cognitiva, también tiende a haber ese prejuicio. Y esto también se merma a que muchas veces nos cuesta conseguir trabajo y nos cuesta conseguir acceso a los créditos hipotecarios, porque obvio nos cuesta pagarlos, pero está al igual que el estigma de la salud, el hecho de la preexistencia. Está esto como implícito culturalmente que nosotros vamos a vivir menos, que no vamos a ser capaces de pagar las cuotas. Y eso es un prejuicio enorme, el cual, como avances en Latinoamérica, se ha luchado por medio de la concientización al entorno que no es oncológico, o sea, la sociedad civil, que no sabe sobre el cáncer, que están a diario viviendo su vida sin saber que al lado puede tener un compañero o un hijo que tuvo cáncer y que hoy en día está luchando por seguir saliendo adelante, sigue trabajando internamente. Y es por eso que a nivel de Latinoamérica, principalmente acá en Chile, se creó la Red Nacional de Sobrevivientes Luz de Esperanza, de la cual soy cofundadora, y en la cual podemos decir que hemos tenido grandes avances debido a que estamos en la creación del Plan Nacional de Cáncer Infantil y podemos dar este cambio, podemos darle la vuelta a la mano y darle la oportunidad a que los sobrevivientes tengan más apoyo, tengan más visibilidad. También tenemos la creación de la red de sobrevivientes pro supervivientes que se desarrolla en Venezuela, ellos muy enfocados en la educación, en poder fortalecer a los sobrevivientes, en el poder entregarles herramientas, educación. También está a nivel internacional de Latinoamérica la creación de la red Faros de Vida, la cual se enfoca en poder reunir a distintos países, Chile, Venezuela, México, Ecuador, Perú, pero aún así seguimos siendo nosotros, que somos los primordiales, como sobrevivientes y sociedad civil, los encargados a poder crear este cambio, porque si nosotros no les creamos la conciencia a quienes no saben, ellos nunca van a saber cómo ayudarnos. Bueno, muchas gracias. Este fue mi aporte.
Sure. Muchas gracias, Carla. Thank you very, very much. I think both Carla and Tiago have really shared some of the difficulties that are faced by survivors in terms of accessing health insurance, but it also shows some of the similarities, doesn't matter which part of the world that you're in, that cancer survivors face in terms of accessing insurance and just going about their daily lives. So I'd like to bring now Cruz from the US, if he could give us a little bit about his experience around being forgotten and in the United States, and what are some of the things that they have done to try and assist and support survivors. So if you can come on. Thank you, Cruz.
Thank you, Cruz. I'm Cruz, and I was born in the border region of El Paso, Texas, and I was also raised into the Juarez. And so, being a U.S. citizen, I was lucky enough to be able to come to the U.S. and get the care that I needed. And at the time, Medicaid was able to cover children with life-threatening illnesses, although it didn't cover everything that came after the fact. And so myself, I'm a hearing impaired individual, and so after I went through everything with cancer, I still had to deal with my hearing impairment. And whenever I had to get insurance or try to get support to pay for my hearing aids, it wasn't there, or I didn't know about it. And so it's not just the case for me, but for a lot of people in the United States. Whenever you have something that some kind of chronic condition, then your health insurance is going to be higher. Or if you have some form of insurance that's state supported or federal government funded, then it may not be enough to cover you. And I'm also, in terms of educational support, I didn't even know what disability services were until I was in college. And so all throughout high school, I had to figure it out by myself. And, I learned to read lips and to improve myself, academically. And, it was just mind blowing to me that I didn't know what disability services were at all. And so it's also something that needs to be reinforced. Overall, I would say that what needs to improve is everything that goes after the fact. We focus so much on saving lives, but we don't focus on whatever happens afterwards and everything that goes with that. And so that's my experience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I mean, and you mentioned an important point of we want to get through the cancer, but once you have survived cancer, there is life after cancer. And how do you navigate that as a survivor? Thank you for sharing with us. I'd like to just give Barack Peter an opportunity now to give us the African perspective and what is his experience in Tanzania post-cancer and just navigating that space of adulthood as a cancer survivor. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. My name is Baraka Peter, and I am survivor from Tanzania. I was suffer with leukemia, ALL stage B, and now I can share some experience which first in my country, Tanzania, and I thought this will be in all over the Africa continent because sometimes we have same thinking about this disease. So it is very honored for me to participate in this session because I think this is good for development for our survivor all over the world. In Tanzania, this disease is very serious and people they sick very serious every day, and they have a lot of big number of children who suffer from the cancer disease. But there is a different challenge for patients to recover quick in this country, and this can be due to the various factors which lead children to recover very fast and to have a high number of survivors in our country or in Africa or the world, because there's a different factor I experienced to see, like issue of financial issues, issue of technology or in getting treatment, issue of poor beliefs. It contributes a lot in failure to get a high number of survivors in our country. And sometimes we have a low government support in our country because government they support in a little way for supporting the children to recover or to be away from to suffer from the disease, but they have a little hand to support those children. Is different from others disease like HIV, like others disease, but in cancer they have a little support which I experience. So the big challenge from those previous I mentioned, they have big challenge in issue of segregations in our society and in our people from different institutions, organizations, or government. So this segregation is coming to when they listen like these children suffer for the cancer of leukemia or what else. They put perception like these children need a special care and need a lot of care. Even if he recover and he is survivor, is away from the treatment, but if they listen or they think this children is suffer from cancer, they think he need or she need a special care. So segregations come where they feel like these children anytime, any day or any month can die. Even if you assure them like I'm okay and I'm a survivor from the cancer, but their perception, they think like any day, any time you will go and die. So this it brings a segregation also in the side of getting a job. In getting a job in our country, because for my experience, when I pass through in different documents, when people want to apply for the job, first thing they look for, or they want issue of medication result or medication report. So if they get answers like previously you suffer from the cancer, they have a big question mark for you, like they think like you don't perform well, or anytime they can lose you to their position or to their job. So for their views, they think like you cannot perform well because all the time you can need a treatment, or all the time you need a special care, or you don't need to move from one place to another to perform different jobs. So if they get to answer like you suffer from cancer, it is very hard to trust you to get a job, and this will be a very challenge to our country. And this I practice through in different institutions which they need a medical result. So if we write there like it, I will suffer from cancer disease. For you, it is very hard to get a job. So for my experience, they have two bad things like segregation in getting jobs and the segregation in our society. So society as a society, they can change, but they need a big chance to they need awareness. They need
Yeah.
They need awareness about this cancer disease. Like if there's someone getting the cancer, he can be treated and can be okay and continue with their life as we are seen here. I'm okay and I'm performing all my things okay. I can perform any job. And the last 3 years I attended in national armies for short course, and I perform well without any problem. So if it happened for me, I'm going to tell someone like I'm okay, and previously I perform. I'm going to perform well to practice in national army. Our national army, they cannot trust you because they think like you lie, then you something like that. So the big issues about segregation. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Peter. And I mean, Barak, you raise an important issue around jobs and the ability to get jobs. I mean, Carla also mentioned something similar, that if you go looking for a job, if you have an obvious disability or sequelae of the cancer, people ask you what's wrong with you. So maybe Tiago, from your context in Europe, what do survivors do? Who can assist them in terms of the jobs issue? Is it even an issue in your environment that some survivors are not able to access certain jobs because of the consequences of illness and treatment post-cancer?
Hello again. Yes. So it's a thematic that we as a survivors group, we are working on it as well, because at one point we don't have too much information on it. And what we just have this information when survivors tell us, for example, in the patient organizations, like parents organizations or as well survivors organizations, when we get in touch with these survivors. So when we hear from them, we know what happens and what is their reality. And in the other sense, the entities and the companies doesn't have a lot of information and don't know a lot of information about the survivorship. So we have to find out here a bridge and to give them the best information that we know about survivorship, like the long-term follow-up and the difficulties that survivors have and the challenges in survivorship, like the one of the finding a job and also to be in a job, because some survivors could not make it to be like 8 hours in a desk, for example. So I think we have to make a connection, and the information is essential in both sides. The survivors has to be informed, and the companies and also the employers have to be available. And so we are working on some materials as well. So yeah, I hope that this would be great for the survivors.
Yeah, wow. No, I mean, you also raised a very important point that it's not just about survivors having the knowledge, but it's important for survivors to tell employers about the knowledge and what's happening and what are the challenges faced by survivors. You know, Cruz, I'd like to bring you in here. You had mentioned that, you know, at some point you were not aware of the disability services. I think you mentioned that. So in the US, what would you advise a survivor to do? What is available to support them afterwards in terms of care and navigating some of those difficulties? Like, who assisted you and how would you advise other survivors to navigate?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I was very lucky to have this support from my hospital, Texas Children's, and they provided a lot of resources to me. And I became aware of a lot of things, including scholarship, to pay for college, and you know, different ways that I could potentially pay for my hearing aids and things like that. So keep in mind that these are things that I didn't even know existed or that I didn't even know were possible. You know, some people at my high school, you know, also helped me. And so what I would advise is just try to find out. I mean, you never know. Don't assume that something does not exist just because it seems too good to be true. And so I would advise people to just ask, you know, their hospital, their school, people at the government, and I would also, you know, advise people that you have the capacity to make change, not just in the United States, but wherever you are. Even if it's a small thing, you can do, you know, seek out your representatives and you know, government officials and pressure them and ask them and tell them what you want to happen and what can improve in the government, what care can be provided, and you know, what resources you need as a survivor. And so I would just advise to just reach out or see what resources are available, ask around, and also, you know, in terms of disability services, you can look for a school that has that. I didn't go to schools that provided those services, but there are some other schools that do have that. And so I would also, you know, advise people to do that. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cruz. And I'd like to bring in Carla here. We discussed the issue around, schools possibly supporting, and maybe from in Chile, what is the role of the treatment centers? We always talk about post-treatment, the treatment centers in preparing childhood survivors for life post-cancer. Is there a role that our hospitals and our doctors can play? Whether it's advocacy or assisting us to navigate post-cancer. So can you give us your experiences in Chile, and what do you think maybe our treatment centers can do for survivors in preparation for survivorship?
Gracias por la pregunta. Y aquí en Chile principalmente existen escuelas hospitalarias. Desde que los niños ingresan a su tratamiento hospitalario, se piensa en que tienen que continuar su ciclo vital correspondiente. Y muchos de los pequeños entran en etapa escolar o están ingresando a la etapa escolar, y ellos, para no perder esta adaptación, poder conocer qué es lo que es estar dentro de una sala de clases, son incorporados a esta escuela hospitalaria, y es una escuela tradicional. Les enseñan las mismas materias, les entregan herramientas, los ayudan también al momento de cómo estar en la sala de clases con los distintos estímulos, porque muchas secuelas que se van asociando con el cáncer afectan a nivel cognitivo, a nivel físico, a nivel conductual también muchas veces, y esto, cuando ya ellos salen del hospital, se empieza a ver reflejado. Por ende, las escuelas hospitalarias igual entregan esta herramienta, más allá que educativa, también herramientas personales, como afrontar distintos contextos. Principalmente la dificultad que existe hoy en día en Chile es que cuando ellos salen de estas escuelas hospitalarias e ingresan a sus escuelas tradicionales o ingresan a un establecimiento en el cual nunca han estado, tienden muchos de los pequeños a desertar o dejan de ir porque reciben burlas, bullying. Muchos de los padres no sienten que tienen un apoyo en el establecimiento, pero pasa muchas veces también porque padres no informan a las escuelas que su pequeño viene recién saliendo del hospital, tuvo tal enfermedad, va a tener tales dificultades, y obviamente en esos casos los docentes no saben cómo abordarlos, no saben si es que este niño va a tener o no alguna dificultad, pero tampoco existe por parte de las escuelas tradicionales el considerar a niños y niñas y adolescentes que tengan secuelas de cáncer. Principalmente aquí en Chile existe la educación especial, pero abordada para patologías más específicas, como el autismo, discapacidad intelectual, entre otras, pero no está considerado entre ellos lo que son las secuelas del cáncer, que puede ser secuelas cognitivas principalmente, al momento de la atención, la memoria, el poder quizás tomar bien el lápiz, o el poder socializar también con sus compañeros dentro de la sala de clase. Eso no está considerado, y se ve la dificultad que existe en estos dos polos. Padres, por temor o por querer olvidarse de la situación del cáncer que tuvo su pequeño, no lo informan al colegio, los docentes no están preparados y el niño queda al medio. O sea, al niño le ocurre algo en el colegio, no van a saber cómo abordarlo, no van a saber cómo atenderlo, solamente llaman a los padres y los padres lo retiran del colegio. Pero en realidad el hecho de que existan las escuelas hospitalarias y logren entregar todas estas herramientas previas son fundamentales. Fundamentales porque ellos ya por lo menos tienen un contexto, saben cómo es estar en una escuela, a pesar de que sea algo protegido.
That's very true, because at least hospitals, schools, you have similar kids, they know the context, and so they're able to assist children who are living with any kind of disease or who are acutely ill. And maybe, I know we don't have much time left, I'd like to just give just Peter an opportunity now just to explain to us, and we'll be taking questions from the floor after this, just to explain to us in terms of Barak, in terms of education. You know, Carla spoke about the hospital schools that are available in Chile. When it comes to Tanzania, and I know the African continent is not one country, but maybe just from the African perspective, when it comes to schooling and education, you spoke about segregation earlier. Is there anything from a schooling point of view that can be done to support cancer survivors? Are the schools doing something? Is there advocacy, whether it's from a survivor point of view or from the hospital point of view, that is helping children to go through school and prepare survivors? Because, you know, for you to get a job, you need to have a good foundation in education. So in Tanzania, are there any difficulties that you're experiencing at a school level, not just at a job level, post survivorship as a child with childhood cancer? And is there anything that is happening to try and assist survivors?
Yeah, so there's some kind of problems in Tanzania, like from my experience which I passed through. For example, when I completed my treatment in Muhimbili, I prefer to back to school. That is the first thing, which I first did, and it needs changes. When I come back to school, they told me that I suppose to go back from the level. I don't need to continue from where I stopped, and they advise me, or they tell me there is need to you to go back to start afresh from the school, and starting again from where you are stopped, because my treatment was take almost 3 years. So policy of our government is, they said, you can stop the studies for almost only 2 years or 3 years or 1 year, but not for 3 years. So for me, it was a big challenge, because it needs me to start afresh. So I lose a long period. I use a long period of getting a treatment and getting the stuff of studying. Like for now, I'm 20 years old, but I'm still at the school. But in our school environment or school area things needs to be changed, or to be aware of this. Like there's a need to understand this disease. There's a need to understand this disease, because in our school or our area of school, if we're talking about cancer disease, it's something like very worse and very bad. People, they don't like to speak about it. And this issue lead us as a survivor. We don't want to talk about it. Yes, for example, for me, in our school, in our university for now, no one know like I will suffer from this disease, because I know when I tell them, there's some kind of segregation, and they feel like this is not strong, this is not like that. So things are supposed to be changed in our school. For example, in Tanzania, we need to have a big support to provide awareness about this disease. For example, I can explain about other disease. Different organizations, different institutions, they come in university and talking about this different disease of the year of the people suffers, like those HIV, those malaria, those typhoid, and etc. But you cannot see an organization or any institution they come in this area of school area and talking about these issues. So this it hinders the development of growing this to get a high number of survivors because people in our country lack a good awareness about this disease. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Barak. I think we are out of time now. Thank you so much for all of you, to Carla, Tiago, Cruz, and Barak, for sharing your experiences with us. I think all the questions that the people who have joined us, the attendees, you can put it in the Q&A, and we'll be able to answer it. And please continue to share your experiences with us. Thank you again to CCI and SIOP for allowing us to share as survivors. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Carl to facilitate the next session for us. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkuli, Baraka, Tiago, Carla, and Cruz. Some great insights there, really sharing the challenges, but also some support that's available. So we need to move right away. Sorry, we don't have time for live questions. So do type your questions in the question answer column. I'm happy to introduce the next speaker. It's spelled Yigit, but he tells us to pronounce it Yit. Mr. Yit Alkan, who's from Turkey. He's a student, is studying engineering at Switzerland. He was treated for Ewing sarcoma at University Oncology Institute in Istanbul. His mother's a nurse, and his father has campaigned tirelessly for cancer rights patients in Turkey. So Yit is coming from a very interesting perspective. He's going to talk about the role of parents as a survivor. He's going to talk the role of his parents. So interesting one. Go ahead, Yit.
Yes, thanks, Carl. Hello, everyone. I'm Yiğit. I'm 20 years old. So I'm international student in Switzerland. Like Carl said, I study computer science. Like 4 years ago, I had a Ewing sarcoma on my scapula. So I went through a treatment process that took 1 year. I got 14 chemotherapy, 1 surgery operation, and radiotherapy. So today I want to talk about patient rights in Turkey. So first, I want to talk about the most important thing about my education. When I got cancer, I was first grade in high school. I was on first grade in high school. So there is a system in Turkey like childhood cancer students can keep studying in their home. So then 1 year they can all their exams at home, and teachers come to home, teach, and go back. And when treatment is over next year, these students can keep moving with their friends to the second year. But like it is the system that's written in books, but in theory there is no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. So I also share my experience. Like in Turkey, in high school, each year we have got 10 courses and 10 teachers for each one, but I had got only 3 teachers to 10 courses. So actually, it wasn't really real education. But like Cruz said before, we had focus just for keeping alive. So it wasn't really big problem for me or for us. But then when I went to school next year, I had some trouble because I didn't find the school I left. The people learned something new, they had experience, but I hadn't, so it was not really good, but I think it can be better in future. So I also keep going with the second most important. We had an ID which is named Çözger, and its English is childhood it's the ID for childhood cancer patients. It's valid till 18 years old just. With that card, the childhood cancer patients have same rights as an adult, 90% disabled. Yes, like for example, we can buy a car without tax-free car. It's really important in Turkey because in Turkey we pay tax more than car, so it's really matter. Also, every patient, every children has a free public transportation card, which includes a campaign. For example, you can also bring someone near you. It's for 2 people, but just when patient they can use like company. Also, we buying flight tickets in Turkish Airlines with 25% discount. So also childhood cancer patients have got opportunities at social security and retiring system. For example, in Turkey, the people who doesn't have cancer history in childhood, they should work 25 years for retiring, but we as childhood cancer, we as survivors, we can work 20 years and then retired, so it's also an advantage. Also, there is one really important thing. During my treatment, one of my parents, my mother or my father, not both of them, just one of them, could have a take time off work like 6 months in 1 year. One of them, my father, didn't go to work 6 months, but he got paid. So it is really good opportunity. So, for example, he could easily take me to radiotherapy, chemotherapy. So that was good. Also, the best oncology institutes in Turkey, in Istanbul, like Istanbul University Oncology Institute. So from different parts from Turkey, the patients wanna always go to Istanbul for treatment, and also government pay their transportation fees, their flight tickets, train tickets, bus tickets. About academician, sometimes government can't solve the problem, so there are lots of societies, so childhood cancers and their parents can stay like 1 week in Istanbul free with these societies. Yes, I think that's all. So do you have question or something?
That's such fantastic examples of in Turkey, where not only have you overcome some discrimination, but there are additional benefits to childhood cancer survivors. Some really good examples. And this is also why we're doing the webinar, so that we're looking at advocating globally and how do we improve the situation for survivors. We are running a bit behind time, so we need to move straight ahead. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A column, which is at the bottom of your screen, I think. Now we're going to go to the parent roundtable. And it's my pleasure to introduce 3 parents we have today. One is from Africa, one from the Middle East, and one from Europe. So beginning with Maria. So Maria, just give me a sec here. Maria is a mother to 4 children. One of them is a survivor. She's accountant by profession, and she's the co-founder of the Ahava Child Cancer Organization in Uganda. And she also loves to sing and swim. So Maria is a mother, and she's going to talk in a minute. Neil Rashingi is a parent of a survivor. of a child with ALL. He is involved in various pediatric oncology groups in the UK. He advocates for children with cancer and their families by being active in a few SIOP groups, including Global Mapping, CEDAR, and Ponte. And then we also have Alaa Al Altoum, who is 40-year-old civil engineer from Jordan. He has 2 children. One of them is a child with cancer, 7-year-old Faisal. So welcome to our speakers. And if you can kick off, maybe Maria, just from your perspective, what is the discrimination you've discovered post-treatment and just some of the issues under this theme of right to be forgotten?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to have an opportunity to speak about the right to be forgotten. For starters, in Uganda, we do not have a chance to health insurance as a country in a whole, but there are several insurances which provide medical insurances. But again, they do not really want to insure people with cancer because they presume it's a long treatment and it also has its after effects. So some of those challenges end up going into the post-treatment as well. And the education bit of it, in most cases, we catch of having school when you're on medication, and so the children end up missing out usually a whole year, depending on how long the treatment is taking. Yeah, and the banks rarely give out loans for medication to do, because they know you, and there's no way you're going to get interest out of that. Yeah, that's it from me. Back to you, Carl.
Yeah, and so let's hear from Neil, just your experience in this regard.
Oh, hi, thanks for having me on here. I think for us, our biggest, my daughter was quite young when she was diagnosed. One of the biggest things we faced was travel insurance. And I don't want to be insensitive here, because I know some people can't possibly travel when their children's on treatment, but we tried to. And travel insurance was very, very expensive. And travel insurance still remains expensive with quite a lot of insurance providers. And speaking to a group of parents of children that had cancer, a thing that came up again and again was the holes and problems they were facing during education. So, for example, sometimes they were having education at hospital, or sometimes they weren't well enough to go to school, or sometimes they missed exams. And generally schools, colleges, universities weren't really that, they weren't really that sympathetic, or they didn't really understand the problems that survivors faced. So one of the things we were thinking about is having someone to guide, someone from the local authority, local government. As soon as a child is diagnosed with cancer, then this person gets in touch with the family and helps them through whatever stage they are of education, whether that's school or college or university. But for me, yeah, basically it was health insurance, education problems.
Thank you for that, Neil. And Alaa, if you want to come in from your perspective.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Are you fine? About Faisal in Jordan, we have Faisal has health insurance from the government, and but not for all treatment, because he needed after cancer return back, we need immunotherapy. That government not cover this. According to education, because the disease affected on Faisal walking, we faced problem in education. And the Al-Hussein Cancer Center in Jordan helped us to find school for Faisal. But it's a simple school, And we hope there will be better school for children who cannot walk. The effective of cancer cannot face by in our country. Okay, and the government insurance not cover all the medical care.
Okay. So is that the main issue in your country on post-treatment? Hello?
Yes.
I said, are those the main issues, or?
Hear you? Can you repeat?
You can't hear me. Okay. Well, maybe just to open up to the others. So we've heard a lot today about discrimination post-treatment, particularly regarding insurance, banking, house loans, etc. We've heard about education. I wonder about social and cultural discriminations. Is there in your countries, in your culture, are people who've undergone cancer treatment discriminate in other ways, that they're blocked from certain social engagements?
Yes, again.
Socially in Jordan, that you want to ask about this?
Yes, beyond just
yes, about
other examples, beyond
family,
education, and yeah, go on.
Yes, my family that helped me to face the cancer. But we cooperate to overcome this problem, and the cancer center in Jordan helped us with the treatment to find a qualified place to educate in it.
Okay, so that's an example of support from the family and the community. Maybe I can go to you, Maria. I know in Africa, having worked in Africa, there can sometimes be social, cultural issues as well that survivors have to face. Going back into the community, you want to talk to that for a moment?
Okay, back here in Uganda, I will still use a case study of Uganda. For example, in sports, you're looked at as a failure, that maybe in your team you will not be able to make it up for them. So socially, you are left out in the sports activities. Even in when it comes to marriages, most of them, if they know your family background, that maybe probably you had a cancer in that family, most families would not want to relate with you in that part. And then also in leadership roles, like in Tanzania, the Tanzanian was saying, you ask, what have you not? So you are living just passes you by because you have a history of a cancer. They think you are a little disabled to do some of these activities. Back to you, Carl.
Yeah, thank you for that, Maria. I think it's important to realize that survivors face consequences in many different areas. I just want to bring Yit, your attention, please. There is a question directed for you on the Q&A. If you would look at the Q&A and answer that question. You want to do it online? Go ahead. Can you read the question?
He's typing it and he's answering. Thanks, Carl.
Okay,
yeah.
you're going to type an answer.
Can I just say something then, Carl?
Please go ahead, Neil.
I think there's two things I'd like to say. One is, one of the survivors earlier on today talked about trying to change legislation where survivors don't have to say they had cancer after a certain period of time. I think if we can all push for that sort of thing, so we're advocating for survivors and we're getting government to take a reasonable approach. And hearing what the last parent said is quite sad and depressing, although I understand where people are discriminating against survivors. So having our guest speaker talking about his bike ride. Those sort of stories, they're just so important, both on a personal level to what he did, but also on a societal level. So you can see that once someone's had cancer, we don't just write them off. They don't just live on the edge of society. They really contribute to society in a meaningful way. And they do things that a lot of people just never do. So it's a great choice on your motivational speaker.
Thank you. And we're going to get to listen to Luke in a minute. So, yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, Neil, because speaking for CCI, Childhood Cancer Management, certainly that is something we would like to see, is a universal right to be forgotten. As we were looking at the subject, one of the things we picked up is that it's not unique to Africa or Europe or Asia, whatever, that in every country, the discrimination might be different. But the right to be forgotten is universal. So that is something we'd like to see happening globally in every country, and it's something that certainly CCI, Childhood Cancer International, will campaign for. I can't speak for SIOP, but I'm sure that would be the case for them as well. Okay, I would now, we didn't give the opportunity for general questions to the survivors as well. So now we're just opening up general questions to any of the speakers on any of the points. Please go ahead.
Perhaps, Carl, you could ask one of the questions we had listed for the audience, and we could see if somebody wants to make an answer to that.
Do you want me to ask the one on to Yit or the one from the parent?
From the parent roundtable, maybe just one general to anyone in the audience from that one, the list.
Yeah, okay, if I can just, Julia, you got in front of you, want to read the question by the parent about not wanting to go back to the post-treatment clinics?
Oh, no, sorry, I meant from our list that we had to brainstorm for the roundtables.
Oh, right. Okay.
Maybe one of those would I assume the audience can see the Q&A answers, is that right? I can throw that out if you like.
Hey, Carl.
Go ahead.
The question that one of the parents asked about not wanting to go back for the survivorship thing. In Uganda, we formed a parents group. I have a child cancer care, and we are basically helping parents and encouraging each other throughout this treatment and the post-treatment. So probably if that parent, they have a parents group, or they can set up something, it would really help them to comfort each one of them, or to tell them, yes, they went through it, but they need to know what are the after effects of this. Is there something coming up that needs to get to the attention of the nurses, and to let them know it's just not about going for post-treatment or going for checkups, but it is something that is important in case the doctors and the nurses see something cropping up that needs their attention. They can easily attack that before it goes out of hand.
Thank you. Any other parents or survivors want to give some advice on a challenge they face, discrimination they face, and how they overcome that, whether it's in the field of education or finances or?
I've just got two quick comments. So I talked about travel insurance earlier on, and the travel insurance varies enormously. So this could be such an obvious thing to say, but if you find that some insurance providers won't give you a quote, then don't give up just after that one quote. There are other insurance providers who might be able to help you. And we found that America was prohibitive. It was going to be really expensive. So we decided we definitely weren't going to go to America during treatment. And although I'm a parent, I do know a little bit about the disease. So for ALL, the my daughter had 3 intensifications, and after the first intensification, she was in remission. So when the insurance providers ask, is your daughter in remission? And some parents thought they weren't in remission until the end of treatment. So this is only acute lymphoblastic leukemia I'm talking about. So when you're getting the travel insurance or insurance, then speak to your consultant and make sure that what you're providing is the correct information, and it might be easier for you, or easier stroke cheaper.
Thank you, Neil. Some good practical advice, and we're getting a few questions in now through the Q&A. I'm going to read one. This is for any of the survivors. What is something you wished your healthcare system would know that they might not? So if you were to advise your healthcare system something they should know that they don't know, what would you say? Any of the survivors?
I would say that just be mindful of, I mean, it's not always easy to do this, and obviously it depends on the treatment plan and what drugs are available. But I think in general, there's a need for safer treatments for kids, and just, you know, it's obviously hard to balance, you know, saving their life and, you know, and you know, trying to negate any side effects. But I would advise, if it can be done, then just to try to use treatments that may be safer or may have less side effects.
Thank you, Cruz. Another question for the parents are the considerations for the other children. So for the children that don't have cancer, what are some of the effects on them? Interesting one on the effects on siblings. One of the parents would want to come in. Ala, you said you got two children. How did you find this affected your other child?
At first time, Taris was sad because of her brother and her mother outside with in the hospital all the time, and we and the effect of her study, and we faced more challenges with her sister because all the time, me and my wife with Faisal at the hospital. This effect on her of her confidence and her education and her all of her life, because the house is not stable. We stay a lot of time outside with nobody that care on it, and she is a child also. It's not an adult, and we face this challenge, and with each other, me and her mother try to solve this problem with her, but it's stay have some of challenges and have in her confidence.
Thank you, Ala. Yeah, and siblings are often the forgotten victims of childhood cancer. So the other one is more a comment than a question, in that Shubha says that parents are worried about recurrence results in overprotection. So I think you're saying that parents are overly protective of the children who've had cancer, and therefore don't allow them to, maybe not allow them, but don't prohibit them perhaps from experiencing things. I wonder what your thoughts on it from the survivors or the parents. Is that something you've experienced? Carla, you wanna come in here and say?
Can you
if
repeat the question, please?
So
Sí,
this is,
sí, gracias.
go ahead, Carla.
En realidad sí, suele ocurrir que los padres, sobre todo si tienen a un hijo, como fue en mi caso, que quedé siendo hija única, se enfocaron mucho en mí y hubo una sobreprotección, pero también estaba el apoyo al alentarme y no limitarme a hacer cosas, que en muchas ocasiones sí ocurre. Muchos de los padres por el temor, por la falta de información o orientación por parte de los médicos, los especialistas, tienden a limitar a sus hijos y les complican más dificultades a desarrollarse. Pero sí, suele pasar muchas veces que los padres, por falta de herramientas, porque no les informan bien los médicos o les entregan información muy general, tienden a cuidar a sus hijos lo mejor posible y tienden a sobreprotegerlos pensando que eso es lo mejor. Y obviamente sin saber que a largo plazo eso les puede conllevar quizás una dificultad emocional por la carga.
Thank you so much for that, Carla. There are some true words there. And now we're going to go on to the next session, and it's very with great excitement that I introduce the next speaker, Luke Griffin-Shaw. Luke was diagnosed with stage 4 sarcoma at age of 24. Against all odds, despite that, he got through the treatment and then decided to do something quite crazy. Maybe you can tell us why, Luke. 30,000 kilometers. I'm a cyclist myself, so I know what this means. From Bristol, UK to Beijing in China. He did this on the tandem bike, and if that wasn't enough, he invited other people with cancer, can livers he calls them, to join him. He's raised 130,000 pounds, British pounds to date for cancer charities, currently producing a film and his book, and I think he's going to show us something later. We will share the link to his site. If someone can put that on the chat or something, if you want to know more. Over to you, Luke.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak here today. It's really quite incredible to see how many people we have from around the world. So hello to everyone from Honduras, Ukraine, Jordan, Colombia, Ethiopia, Nigeria, India, Italy, Uganda, and many, many more countries. I know there are more countries on that list, but I just think it's incredible that we have this truly global event. And thank you for inviting me to share my story. Now, it's interesting that this seminar is called The Right to be Forgotten, because I suppose a lot about what I will be talking about is how to make a statement and how to be remembered. But I think there are themes that have been talked about already that we can come back to, whether that's parental permission, challenges through treatment. So I will try and keep my talk relatively short to about 18 minutes. That means that there will be hopefully a long time for questions. So if you have questions, then please write them down. So to begin with, I am going to share with you a short 3-minute video about me and this cycle journey that Carl very briefly outlined. And then I will tell you a little bit more about myself and that journey. So, technology allowing, let me tell you about Bristol to Beijing. Let's see. Get that full screen. And someone tell me if you can't hear it. I think I've shared my sound, but if you can't hear it, let me know. Okay, enjoy.
It's always been my dream to cycle across the world. Then, at the age of 24, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
On the day that I was diagnosed with cancer, I realized if I only got the chance to do one more thing, it's going to be cycle around the world. Every time I went to my chemo, I got on my bike and I cycled there. It's about taking control of the situation, even in a small way. Grabbing life by the horns.
If you're diagnosed with the cancer, like as me, people are just like got that mindset. If person is diagnosed with the cancer, he gonna be die. There's no hope.
I'm cycling 30,000 kilometers across 30 countries and have shared the journey with over 300 people.
We're in Pakistan!
How are you doing? Great, what about you? I'm loving it!
Including my mum.
Sharing these experiences with him, these are memories that are going to be really important for me. Every time you go through a difficult experience with somebody, either makes or breaks the friendship, doesn't it? But it's safe to say it hasn't exactly been straightforward.
I mean, things go wrong on a daily basis.
Nothing left.
Oh, coronavirus, my God, why? It's going to be so complicated.
But there's no other way I'd rather spend my time.
Today finish line or 20 years later, doesn't matter. Today we must live 100%.
What I really hope by sharing my story, by doing the cycle ride, is that it provides a little bit of hope to anyone who's been diagnosed with cancer and to the families of those who are sharing that struggle with them.
My name is Luke Grenfell-Shaw, and I am a can liver.
Okay, so that is Bristol to Beijing. You might have questions already, and you might be wondering, what is a can liver? I hope I can go some way to answering these questions. So let me load this up. If you guys do want to follow or find out more about me, you can go to the website that I think might be in the chat, or you can follow on Instagram at Luke G. Shaw. So I now really want to tell you a story, a little bit about my life and how I came to have cancer. I started life with a very wonderful family, with two supportive parents, my brother John, but as you can see, with a somewhat questionable sense of haircut. There was a lot I had to learn in my life, and getting good haircut was one of those things. So I'm from the UK. I was very lucky to go to a great school. I worked hard, I studied hard, I did well, as did my brother. And it came to pass that after I'd graduated from university, I decided to go on a little bit of an adventure to Russia. And this is back in 2018. I'd studied some Russian at school, and I wanted to be able to speak Russian fluently. And I was in the peak of my health. I was sort of 23, 24 years old. I had made a great group of friends. I was working as a teacher, and I was running ultra marathons. So this is me running a 50-kilometer race in the Ural Mountains in Siberia. And it had seemed that my life was going completely according to plan. However, at this point, I just had one thing that was slightly annoying. And I had an ache in my left shoulder. And I ignored this ache for months. You know, I was a sports person. Maybe there are quite a few other people here on this call who have a sport that they love, whether that's cricket or basketball, football. And when you've got a sport that you love, you pick up aches all the time and you ignore them. And that is exactly what I did with this ache. Months passed until I eventually went to the doctor in Russia. And I said, look, I have this aching shoulder. I expect it's nothing, but could you have a look at it? And the doctor said, well, okay, take your top off and turn round. And when I turned round, the doctor gasped and she said, Боже мой, which means, oh my God. Because this is what she saw. My left shoulder was enormous. And that was the first moment when I realized that something was wrong. 48 hours later, I went back to the UK. I was in hospital with a biopsy needle sticking into my back. I had a load of scans done. That will be something quite familiar to a lot of the can livers on this call and a lot of the parents as well. By this point, I thought it probably is cancer. I'm prepared for this. I expected it's cancer. I had done a degree in biology after all, which hadn't helped me work out that it was cancer. But at this point, I thought, okay, you know, it's going to be cancer, but probably it'll be fine. I'll have an operation and within a few months, I'll be able to carry on with my life. And I went see the doctor to get the scan results, to get the results from the biopsy. And they said, Luke, you have cancer, but it's already spread to your lungs. You've got 13 lung nodules. It's also very rare, very aggressive, and it's clearly very advanced. You don't have long to live. And at that point, I thought I wouldn't be alive by Christmas. I thought I had 6 months left to live. It was a very rare type of sarcoma called a triton tumor, MPNST, and these things do not respond well to chemotherapy. So it felt like I'd been given a death sentence. And I went home and I just cried into the sofa. I cried and I cried. And it was the worst day of my life. I felt like I was being told I was going to die, and all the dreams I'd had, all the things I was going to do, like buying a house and climbing the career ladder and having a family, that had all been taken away. And during that time, this is what my life felt like, slumped in beds. I'm very aware that this is an incredibly luxurious hospital room to have. And I know that better having done my trip, but I was not in a good place mentally anyway, despite the incredible care that I was lucky to have in the United Kingdom. My dad saw me lying on the sofa, crying on the sofa, and he came up to me and said, Luke, let's go for a run. I thought, that is the last thing I want to do right now, go for a run. But we made an agreement that if he gave me a cup of tea to drink, then I would go for a run. We ran out across Bristol, and that's where I'm from, the city of Bristol. And we went to the park, and my dad said, Luke, the fact that you have cancer, an incredibly serious cancer, as a father, is the worst thing that I can imagine. but there's nothing that I can do about it. And you can't control whether you have cancer or not. You now have it. And even if you've only got 3 or 4 or 5 months left to live, and that's awful. That's almost the worst thing imaginable. But my dad said to you, Luke, Luke, you still have a choice about how you spend those 3 or 4 months you've got left to live. And I realized that I could be angry and annoyed and frustrated and resentful that my life was being cut short at 24 years old. But then my last 3 or 4 months would just be full of anger and sadness. And I realized that actually I wanted my last few months to be the best months I could possibly make them. Even if I was in hospital with chemotherapy, with radiotherapy, with surgery. So I decided I'd do everything I could to have a good time in my last 3 or 4 months. But I also decided that I wanted to do everything that I could to give myself the best possible chance. Never certainty, but chance of living longer. And so my time in hospital also looked like this. Same hospital, almost the same day, but here's me on my bike, exercising, one of the most powerful things that we can do to help yourself. One of the things that you think you're probably not able to do if you're on chemotherapy, if you're tired, if you're sick. I wasn't cycling hard, but just getting your heartbeat moving, just putting your blood around your body. My chemotherapy was much more effective than anyone thought. I was able to withstand the toxicity much better than the doctors predicted. And I know that exercise was a huge part of this for me. I had 6 rounds of chemotherapy, I had surgery, and then I had radiotherapy. This photo was taken the day after I finished my radiotherapy. I was studying at a University of Oxford in the UK, and I did a race the day after I finished radiotherapy, and I won. And to me, that is just a testament to how active you can be to an extent through treatment, but also how you don't need to let go of your dreams and what you're passionate about. Now, I promised you a talk about a cycle ride, and there has been no bicycles. Well, there's been 1 bicycle so far, but there hasn't been the bike in question. Now, on the day that I was diagnosed with cancer, I had this tiny kernel of a thought in my mind that is, if I somehow survive, I want to cycle around the world. I didn't think I would, but I just knew that that was my dream. No one else's, but that was my dream. And so when I got through treatment, I realized I now had this opportunity. And on the 1st of January, 2020, I set off from Bristol for an expedition on this tandem bike to Beijing. It was to be an expedition, as you know, of 30,000 kilometers, raised a lot of money for charity, and had a whole load of different people join me on the back. But the most important people who joined me on the back of this bike were can livers. I'm going to tell you more about what I mean by this term can liver in just a second. But both Eleanor on the back here, Kate on the back here, and several more I will introduce you to were also people with cancer who joined me on this bike trip. And just in case you're trying to work out, well, what does 30,000 kilometers mean? Well, this was my route. Wiggling through Europe, going through Ukraine to Mariupol, then going through Turkey, Azerbaijan, through Central Asia, then crossing Pakistan and India and Bangladesh. It was really quite an extraordinary adventure, and one I was very lucky to do. It certainly wasn't all easy. There were times when there were incredible headwinds, there was rain, but I met some incredible people along the way, including this guy called Gennady Mohnenko, who lived in Mariupol in Ukraine, in the far east of Ukraine, who had adopted 37 children. And his cause was adoption. And he challenged me to say, Luke, well, what are you doing your ride for? It's great that it's your dream, but it needs to have a wider impact. And I realized that what I was most passionate about was trying to show what is possible with cancer, and perhaps giving people a little bit of hope in what can seem like a hopeless situation, because my situation had seemed hopeless. I had my mum come out and join me several times, both in Switzerland and Georgia, and also India. And I think family would be a really fascinating thing to talk about in the questions about, did my parents let me? Why did they let me? How does that happen? And as I said, I was joined by an amazing group of people who also had cancer. This is Kate in 2018. She was diagnosed with ACC, adrenocorticocarcinoma, stage 4. She didn't think she would live, but several years later, she decided to join me on this adventure. And we crossed Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan together. This guy is Hamza. Hamza I met in Lahore in Pakistan at the Shaukat Khanum Cancer Hospital there. He was diagnosed with cancer as a kid and was basically told he was going to die. And here he is about 10, 12 years later, about to go to university, and he also joined me on this trip. Perhaps the most special guy of all was this guy called Dev, who Kids Can in India put me in touch with. They're a cancer charity out there. As a kid, he'd been diagnosed with cancer, but managed to pull through. He hadn't been on a bike in about 3 years when he joined me. And Dev wasn't a sportsman. He wasn't a cyclist. He was actually probably the last person you'd expect to join me on this cycle trip. And as you can see from his clothing, it wasn't exactly traditional cycle kit either. But Dev really displayed what this ride was all about. It's about showing what's possible with cancer, but not just me doing it, but Dev being the last person that you'd expect to cycle with me on this tandem. We cycled halfway across India, all the way from Chandigarh to Varanasi, almost 1,500 kilometers. And this is us when we reached Varanasi. Now, all of these people I call can livers. And you've heard me use this term several times. I use the term can livers because I really don't associate myself with the term cancer survivor. For me, it gave a sense of certainty that you've somehow survived, that you've got past your cancer, that I never felt. Ever since I finished treatment, I've had scans every 3 or 4 months. And every single time I've had a scan, I've been expecting my cancer to come back. It's not one of the curable ones. So I couldn't call myself a survivor. I couldn't call myself a cancer survivor, but I wanted to give myself a term that summed up what it meant to live with cancer, at least in my opinion. Which on one side says, yes, there are challenges and there are uncertainties when you live with cancer. You have to go through treatment, you're tired, you're sick. You don't know how long you're going to be around. You know, will you be able to have kids? Will you be around for your school reunions? But on the other side, it's an optimistic term. We can live with cancer. We can still do so much to help ourselves. We can have rich and full experiences. And that is what I've been very, very lucky to show. And that has been what this trip is all about, showing what is possible with cancer. And these are just some of the people who have done it with me. Everyone from the UK to Pakistan to India to China and most places in between. And these are the thoughts I want to sort of draw to a close on. But then this is the advice my dad had told me. None of us in this room had any control over if we had got cancer. That was something we simply had to deal with and accept. But we can choose our responses to it. And that might not sound like enough, like much, but it's more than the entire world, in my opinion. Because you can live with cancer and still do the things that you love. You can bring them into your life. You can bring them into the hospital. You can live with cancer and still do things to help yourself. And I'll finish by talking about some of the things that I think are so important in how we can help ourselves with cancer. That's just a great photo of Dev, which shows what a wonderful guy he is. But first of all, physical activity. You saw me on the bike in hospital. Physical activity for me was one of the most important things. Boosting mood, increasing the impact and efficacy of chemotherapy, and taking control and having an identity beyond treatment. Diet. I certainly cut out all of the junk food, all of the sugar. I try to have a very healthy diet. I think that also had a big impact. And the final thing are the family and friends. I had huge amounts of support. This is something we touched on in this conference today. But without them and without their support, I don't think I would have been able to approach my treatment and my disease like I did. And it's been one of the adjustments after treatment and this ride that I don't have the same level of support. And that's been a surprisingly difficult adjustment. I've talked for quite long enough. So now it is time for some questions. I would love to hear your thoughts. I haven't had a chance to read the comments, so hopefully Carl can bring the conversation in. But thank you for the time and thank you for this opportunity for giving this talk. These are some of the charities that I supported and partnered with on my trip. And if you want any more information, then you can follow those links above. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Luke. There are no words. I mean, a lot of the comments were just on how inspirational it was and so forth. But yeah, I'm sure that people have lots of questions and thoughts. So let's open up the mic again. Any thoughts you want to share with Luke? Questions?
Excuse me 1 second, Carl. There's a comment in the Q&A from Hussein, Luke, and he says, "Hey, Luke, OMG, I did not expect to see you. Glad to see you here. I am happy now. Don't forget Turkey. Luke has a great advocacy example. I recommend everyone to follow him. I think you met Hussein in Ankara, maybe."
Oh, awesome. Right. Yeah, I'm trying to find the comment, but yes.
It's in the Q&A. If you look at the Q&A, he also had, it's sitting there. If you click on the Q&A button.
Right. I'm trying to find the Q&A button. But yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And yes, indeed. Okay, there's the Q&A.
Luke, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
After saying, first, I'm sure I'm sharing with everyone's audience, that message is so inspiring. It's truly inspiring. But my question for you is, so what's next?
It's a great question. I think in simple terms, I'm trying to spread that message. So basically, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was Googling stage 4 cancer survivor, and I couldn't find anyone. Or I could find a few people with curable testicular cancer. And I thought that doesn't apply to me, because I was basically told this is something you're never going to get rid of, you know. And it's really surprising that I'm alive today. That's not what people expect. And so I want to be an example, or just a reference point that you can have essentially an incurable stage 4 cancer and still be around and do what you want in your life. I'm writing a book, I'm making a film. Hopefully that will get the message out to a lot more people. I'm actually about to do a filming expedition, a very small trek for 3 or 4 days in China with a young Chinese can liver, so someone with cancer. I'm still looking for a young Chinese can liver to do it with. If anyone knows of a young Chinese can liver, then let me know. And I'm doing a lot of trail racing. So I'm doing I'm going back to where I started and doing ultra long distance running races in the UK and Europe.
Wow, brilliant. We'll all be following you.
Thanks, Neil.
Excellent. Go ahead, Alan. Alan's got a question.
Yeah, and my dog is barking, Luke, just to give the whole thing authenticity. But I wanted to ask you this, for me, a really important question, and that is, there's a lot of literature now on exercise in cancer in general, and in cancer, particularly in cancer in high intensity settings. So it's become the zeitgeist to put exercise bicycles in AYA cubicles in stem cell transplants. So we know that, but I want to ask you a different question. So, I mean, clearly exercise is good, but I'm thinking to myself, there are people in the audience, they look at you and they go, geez, that's amazing. And Dev, like, sure, but I'm not a sporty guy, you know. So, you know, Luke goes across the world. What would you say to the people who identify themselves as not sporting?
Yep, brilliant question, Alan. Thank you very much for asking that. And I think, yeah, absolutely, it can to a certain extent, cycling across the world means that in some ways you're not a great ambassador for, it's just too much, right? It's a bit inaccessible. I think the point that I would really bring this back to is that something like a tiny amount is infinitely more than nothing. And so I think it's just as amazing, it's just as wonderful, and it's just as important to walk up and down the corridor of your hospital 3 or 5 times, right? To just to move. And I think the most important thing is to do something and to start small. And of course, everyone is at a different point in their treatment, the level that they come in. But almost the smaller, the better to start with. And then I think the other thing that needs to change is the permission giving. Maybe this is happening already, but I think a lot of people think that you can't exercise during treatment, and doctors up to this point, and certainly my doctors were like, I was like, you know, should I be like thinking about exercising? Should I be thinking about walking? And they were like, no, do what you want. But to me, that's the wrong message. I think there should be a much more powerful message saying, will be beneficial if you do exercise, and it's safe to do so as long as you're careful. So I think that will help as well.
Thanks, that's a great answer.
Thank you for that, Luke. And there's a question on the Q&A, which is similar to what you said now from Andreas. When engaging in high endurance exercise, what are some of the things you have to consider as can liver regarding your physiology?
Yeah, so this is something I also got wrong. Early on, I didn't know what I could do and what I couldn't do. So I did come from a background of having done quite a lot of physical activity. And so after my first round of chemotherapy, I think 2 or 3 days after, maybe 2 days afterwards, I went for a cycle ride, and it was too soon. I was wiped out, and it wiped me out for another 2 days. And so I had to learn by making mistakes, essentially, of like what your body can cope with. But at least for me, I was able to walk every day, even when I was in hospital and on chemo. And when I was in hospital, I was connected to a drip for 20 hours out of 24. And for those 4 hours that I was off the chemo, in one of those hours, I'd go for a little bit of a walk. And I found that I could always do that without it taxing my body too much. But yeah, listen to your body. I think that's the most important thing. And distinguish between sort of the sickness you get from chemo and the fatigue you get from radio, and also listening to your body of what when you do some physical activity. And of course, it's really important to do it safely, in accordance with your doctor's sort of guidance as well.
Great, thank you. And yeah, everybody wants to know where they can get your book and when is your film coming out. But we can put something on the book on the chat. Julie, we have time for one last question.
I'm so sorry. I think you have to move to Joe to sum us up. It's been a fantastic day.
Yeah, look, it's been so inspirational. I think you've really encouraged so many people today and given us some really good advice. So really appreciate it. But unfortunately, we do have to move on. And it's also my pleasure to introduce Juan de Bragança. Juan is our president. He's the president of CCI, Childhood Cancer International. He's a bereaved father. His daughter was diagnosed with cancer at age 7. And Juan has been involved with fighting the cause and fighting for the cause of childhood cancer, taking the cause forward since 2020. So he's also the president, I should add, of Creditar Association in Portugal. Over to you, Juan.
Thank you, Carl. Well, it's very difficult to say something slightly interesting after so many powerful statements, especially such as Luke's. Perhaps I could occupy these closing minutes of the webinar by repeating the word that best characterizes these 2 hours. Fantastic. This was our 3rd Survivors webinar celebrating Survivors Week. This year, and for the first time, and for sure not the last one, we have gone totally global as we organized a similar webinar in Asia, gathering people from that part of the world. From news I have received, I know it was a success as well. And I am sure that when we hear it and when we cross testimonies, we will realize that many challenges to survivors and parents are similar, whether you are in Colombia, in Uganda, or in India. I think 2 of the most powerful statements I heard today was, you don't have long to live, but also we focus on saving lives, but we don't think about life thereafter. These are indeed 2 powerful statements and should be the basis for our roadmap for the future. As I always say, the survivors, and Luke is the living proof of that, play a very important role in our community because they can show that the disease can be beaten. We should fight for more survivorship so that children doesn't have to hear what Luke heard, but we must also fight for a better survivorship. And this means fighting discrimination, whether it is legal, socio-cultural, professional, and medical, or even taking care to language, so that we don't put much pressure on the survivors by saying that they are strong, that they will overcome everything, or even teaching potential employers what it means to be a childhood cancer survivor. Exercising the right to be forgotten is a global problem, and as Carl has already mentioned, CCI, together with its partners like SIOP, will necessarily have to address this issue. I have a final slide that I would like to share with you. So, I don't know if you can see the slide already.
Yes, it's
Can you
good.
see the slide? Okay. So, first of all, I don't want to close this webinar without expressing a few thank yous to a few people, organizations, without whom this webinar would not have been possible. I would like to thank the St. Jude team and the translators team, who played for the third consecutive year a key role in this webinar, and they are already our family. Thank you also to SIOP, to Alan, to Julia, to Milena, to Suzanne, to others, for a very strong partnership, for their permanent availability, and for taking the lead in key moments of the project. Thank you to the CCI team, Alejandra and Carlos mostly, for their continuous dedication and competence. Last, but surely not least, thank you to the moderators for their incredible work, and to the participants for wanting to share a bit of their lives and experience. I am sure that somewhere in the world there has been someone, a survivor or a parent, who could relate to what they heard, who found a possible solution for a problem, or who felt more accompanied in his or her challenging journey. Deep down, many of the challenges that parents or survivors face are global, and this should be food for thoughts. As the collective voice of health professionals, parents, patients, and survivors, are we doing enough to address these global problems? Finally, thank you to everyone who saw and heard us for investing 2 hours on a Saturday to participate in this webinar, which is already a key moment in the SIOP and CCI calendars. Let us meet again in 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.